Hello, and welcome to CultureCast. Today on our radio show, we will be discussing the film Blackboards. We have got a lot of fascinating guests here to speak with us today about the film. How exciting! We are going to have a great time today. For all you new viewers out there, I'm Maureen, the host of this show. Before we talk about the film's details, let's discuss how truly universal this film is. Do all societies value education? Why does our society tell us that we must get a college degree? Education is not prioritized in Iran during the time period of this film because the need to survive is more important. The director portrays this concerning lifestyle in the film Blackboards. In the hills of Iranian Kurdistan, education is only important after you fulfill your need for shelter and food. Maslow's hierarchy of needs explains what motivates our behavior. The lowest level of Maslow's pyramid is made up of the most basic needs, while the more complex needs are located at the top of the pyramid. The lowest level needs are for food, water, sleep, and warmth. Once these lower needs are met, people can move on to the next level of needs. In the film Blackboards, these basic needs of survival are not yet fully fulfilled. As a result, the characters are not motivated by the thought of education. So, what happens to a culture in which education is undervalued? This concerning way of life is illustrated in the film Blackboards. We are so fortunate to have the director's best friend, Haley, here with us today. Thanks for coming into the studio.
No, thank you for having me today. I'm so proud to be here today speaking on behalf of my best friend, Samir. As many of you know, she was the director and writer of Blackboards. Samir was born in Iran in 1980. As a child, she grew up around film because her father was a director. He also helped her write the script for this film.
Wow, you don't say.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? As a child, she was casted into some of his films. When she was 15, she dropped out of school and 3 years later produced her first film, The Apple. This film, along with Blackboards and At 5 in the Afternoon, her most recent film, all focus on a struggle within the characters.
Thanks again, Haley. That was so fascinating. Now let's discuss the plot. The film Blackboards takes place in the hills and villages of Iranian Kurdistan, near the Iraqi border during the Iran-Iraq War. The mountainous area is constantly in danger due to the armed soldiers that patrol the skies, roads, and border. Can you imagine living somewhere like that?
No, I can't even imagine what they went through.
So true. Anyways, two teachers named Said and Rebar follow their own path and become detached from the group. Both teachers are constantly ignored or turned down by village people and traveling kids. During Said's quest for acceptance, he comes across an old man who wants a letter read to him from his son who is in an Iraqi jail. He attempts to help translate the letter for the old man, but can't actually translate the message because he isn't familiar with the language. That part was almost comical. Soon after, he continues on his journey. The film then splits into two different storylines based on Said and Rebar's different paths. That's when things get interesting. Rebar heads up the mountain where he encounters a group of Kurdish boys called mules carrying illegal and unspecified contraband. The tired and overworked boys have no interest in learning to read or write from him, yet he continues to walk with them. Rebar argues that with the ability to read, the boys would be able to read stories and newspapers and learn what is going on in the world. In response, the boys say they already know stories of their own, like the story of hunting a rabbit. Finally, one boy wants to learn how to write his name in return for giving Rebar bread. During their dangerous trek up the mountain, one boy falls and breaks his leg while running from gunshots. Rebar uses his blackboard to construct a splint for this injured leg. The boys also admit to being able to read, but initially not telling Rebar because they don't trust strangers. Later in their journey, the boys crawl on their hands and knees behind a herd of goats at the border as a group of guards open fire on them. As they continue walking, explosions go off and they are forced to sprint to avoid getting hit. Unfortunately, some are killed.
Wow, that was my least favorite part. So sad. I think I almost cried.
I know, same here. Then we dive into the other storyline. Said finds no one interested in his services in the village, so he joins a caravan of elderly people and a woman with a son who are trying to find their way back to their Iraqi border. He offers to guide them to their homeland in return for a bag of walnuts. He quickly receives the nickname Blackboard. He learns that an old man is dying because he can't urinate, so he offers his blackboard as a stretcher to carry him. Said also learns that the man can't die in peace unless he can marry off his widowed daughter to someone. The old man's daughter, Halayla, agrees to marry Said and accepts his blackboard as dowry. During their trek, there is little to no communication between them. Said constantly attempts to educate her, but she refuses to speak to him unless she and her son need his blackboard to hide from gunshots. He gives her low grades when she refuses to pronounce or write "I love you," as if she is a disobedient student. Her father, the old man, struggles to urinate throughout the entire journey and finally relieves himself toward the end. Said, Halela, her son, and her father all hide under the blackboard to hide from shots being fired at them. Said provides protection for the group. The elderly group then hurries to escape the area.
Yeah, this part got really exciting.
At that point, Halela's son, Sean, leaves the group and chases a rabbit he sees. Halela then chases Sean, and Said chases Halela. In response to Said's complaints that she left him, Halela yells, "My heart is like a train. At every station someone gets on or off, but there's someone who never gets off, my son." Said is taken aback. When the group arrives at their destination, Said wants to stay in Irani Kurdistan, while Halela wants to go back to her village in Iraqi Kurdistan. So, as quickly as they got married, they got divorced. Said loses both his blackboard and his wife. There are so many fascinating characters in this film, and we are lucky to have John here with us, who is one of the country's best film critics. How's it going, John?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me. Here in the film, we actually decided to follow one of the smugglers and watch what they developed throughout the film. And in the beginning, we noticed that all the boys that were on in the desert on the hills, Rebar was trying to talk to them and tell them, hey, like, you guys really should learn how to read and write. And actually, none of the boys respected them. They told them to get out of their way because they just wanted to keep going on in their journey because they have a job to do. And so throughout the film, we watched the boys, and they kept going on their own trail to go cross the border. And Rebar did not give up. He was relentless the entire time, and kept trying to say, you know what, read and write. Like, kept having his blackboard. Kept every stop they had, he tried to teach them. And finally, at the end, we saw that one of the boys actually took interest to Rebar and decided to really learn how to read and write, and was able to write his own name by the end.
Yeah, that was pretty crazy, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was shocked, but yeah, it was pretty cool. Don't you think one of the blackboards must have been a great symbol throughout the movie?
It really was. The blackboards represented education, stability, strength, and protection. The blackboard is a teaching tool, a splint for one of the boys' injured legs, a stretcher when one of the men stumbles and falls, a clothesline for an overburdened mother, and a shield. The blackboard symbolized both the value and burden of education, which is pretty interesting, don't you think?
Yeah, definitely. How about that old man throughout the movie who wasn't able to pee?
Yeah, that was pretty weird, but I think that was actually a motif used in the film.
Oh, really?
Halela's father struggles to urinate throughout literally the entire film, and as a result, he is close to death. His failure to pee represents the people's overall struggle in life. They strive to overcome problems they can't necessarily control, but life keeps holding them back. Once he finally relieves himself, their group is able to escape from the chaos and reach their homeland. They are finally relieved from their troubles. Our film analyst is calling in right now. Let's see what she has to say.
Hi, I'm Jess. I'm a specialist in film analyzation. I can't wait to talk to you about the themes and the use of time in Blackboards.
All right, jump right in.
Now we're going to talk about some of the themes in Blackboards, which include hardship, desire, and taking advantage of what they do have. The characters in Blackboards experience hardships every single day. This movie shows what they have to go through just to make it through each day. They have no food, no money, and no home. Every day they have to cope with these issues. Another main theme is desire. The wandering old people yearn for a home. They seek a place where they feel comfortable and desire a feeling of safety. Lastly, the characters in Blackboards take advantage of what they do have. All they have is a blackboard and a little bit of knowledge. They use this skill to teach and gain rewards to help them survive.
Wow, those are some pretty intense themes. What else do you have to tell us?
You know what else is really fascinating about this movie? The use of time. In Blackboards, the use of time is very straightforward. There are no flashbacks, but the film does switch between the two plots of the two Kurdish teachers. The story happens over what seems like the course of just one day, which again shows just how much they have to go through in such a short period of time.
Those are some interesting points, Jess. That got me thinking. I found it exceptionally ironic that the focal point of the film was about reading and writing, yet only 2 of the cast members were actually able to read and write. Rebar and Said did their best to try and teach the smugglers, but were continuously rejected by the very end. Another piece of irony I saw was the actual blackboard. I noticed the blackboards are constantly carried on the men's back like a backpack. It was almost like a hassle to carry. I thought this represented the burden of education. Education has always been in the news and likely will remain a topic forever. Teachers and professors are always trying to push their students to perform at their highest quality, thus placing a heavy burden on their shoulders. There is also the burden of paying for college tuition with costs constantly rising. Are you in-state or out-of-state, Maureen?
I'm in-state, actually. Thanks for
lucky you.
asking.
I hear the out-of-state tuition is crazy, so I feel bad for those people. But, I mean, education is constantly just putting a huge burden on people's shoulders, and I feel like that can be represented through the blackboard in this film.
Thanks, John. Now we have Molly here, who actually worked on the set of the film. I'm sure she has a lot of good stuff to tell us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm here to talk to you all a little bit about what it was like to be on the set of the film Blackboards. The director, Samira, made a conscious effort to create a film that was as realistic as possible. For instance, there's only one professional actress in the film. Many of the actors were hired on location in Iran. In fact, Samira originally casted one of Iran's most experienced actors, but quickly realized he was different from the other non-professional actors in the way that he tended to over-exaggerate his acting. Samira didn't approve, so he was given the boot. The group of smuggling boys featured in the film were all pulled from a local village in Iran. Upon meeting them, the boys told Samira that smuggling was what they did day to day for survival. Being a fugitive and exposed to poverty was real life for these boys, which Samira ended up basing much of their storyline off of in the film. Another way in which Samira really focused on the reality of her characters' lives.
Wow, I didn't know that. Tell us more.
Yeah, interesting, huh? Well, the cinematography used throughout the film also contributes to the documentary feel that Samira was going for. Although filmed in 2000, wouldn't you guess that it was filmed a lot longer ago due to its poor quality?
Definitely.
Yeah, well, Samira had all the resources in the world to make this a high-quality Hollywood film. Yet, staying true to her goal of making the film as raw as possible, she made the decision to film on-site in Iran, where filming resources weren't as readily available. The grainy quality gives it a more documentary feel, and the use of very little variation in color and props directly relates to the poverty and hardship faced in the oppressed area. Samira swindled her way around Iranian censorship, and her film had to be smuggled out of the country. Samira went above and beyond to provide her audience with an authentic insight into the dishearteningly violent ways of life between the two nations.
Wow, sounds like she put a lot of work into making this film so amazing.
She certainly did.
I think the dialogue she chose to use was interesting. The film has a lot of repeated phrases revolving around the teachers begging to be hired. The repetition created an annoying tension for the audience, don't you think?
Yeah, I thought that too.
Similarly, Said keeps trying to force Halayla to say I love you, which represents his deeper frustration to be appreciated and needed, both as a teacher and a husband. Halayla's one big line of the film is very impactful. She says, "My heart is like a train. At every station, someone gets on and off. But there is someone who never gets off, my son." I thought that was a powerful statement that ultimately leads to their divorce. Hey, John, what are your thoughts on the values in this film?
In this film, I thought the values were kind of mixed. Samira includes kids smuggling contraband across the border, which clearly is a bad value judgment, especially when they're younger kids and are trekking across steep terrain. One of the boys even ends up slipping off the edge and breaking his leg. He lived, but having kids do this is not a good idea in general. Some of the better values that Samira used throughout the Blackboards film was with the character Halayla. She was very protective of her child. Wherever he went, she went, and always had an eye on him. As soon as he wandered off from the group, she noticed immediately and ran to grab him. Her child is one of the few things that Halayla has left, so she cherishes every moment she has with him and constantly watching out for his safety.
I definitely agree, John. Molly, back to you. We were talking earlier about your thoughts on the presence of communities in this film. Can you elaborate?
Yeah, another thing that I found really fascinating about the film was the presence of communities. A community is defined as a group of people living in the same place who may feel a connection to each other as a result of sharing common attitudes, interests, or goals. In Blackboards, we see the presence of quite a few communities, mostly divided by age, and each with different priorities. The middle-aged men carrying the blackboards represent one community. These men are on a mission to teach, in the hopes that their potential students may utilize their newfound education to seek better circumstances for themselves outside of the harsh realities that they were experiencing. Another community is depicted by the group of young boys that Rebar begins to follow. Despite his efforts to teach, Rebar finds that the boys could care less about learning how to read or write. Each of them is always on the move with bags strapped to their backs containing all sorts of contraband goods that they are attempting to smuggle across the border, something that in education would just slow down. The third community present in Blackboards is a caravan of lost refugees trying to find home. Saeed tags along with this group, and it becomes fairly clear that their consensus on education is that their time to learn is over, and all they are interested in doing is returning to their homeland to spend the rest of their lives. Each community we stumble across seems to have a common goal binding them all, which is simply to survive day to day, which did not appear to be an easy task.
Thank you all so much for being here today.
Anything for you, Maureen.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem.
You guys are the best. So, why is education so undervalued? The need for food and safety will always come before education in any society. However, in our American society, where those basic needs are given, teachers are still underpaid compared to other professions. Even when education is a priority, our educators still aren't treated as well as doctors or businessmen. The teachers in the film Blackboards and the teachers in our society struggle with this injustice every day. These similar struggles make the film universal. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed this episode of CultureCast. And as we say in the studio, stay curious!